Good afternoon and welcome back to this episode on Digital Craftsman TV. I'm here with our illustrious leader, Simon. Hello.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to your own YouTube channel.
Thank you very much.
Welcome back, should I say. Today we're going to be talking about jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to be talking about all those evil robots that are coming to take our jobs. Yep. Because automation is on the rise, and we all know it's a destructive force, and it's to blame for all of the evils in the world.
Yep.
Or is it?
Yes and no. As these things always are, there's always there's a good side and a bad side to these things. So, as we've seen the rise of automation, or the rise of virtualization to start with, and then the rise of public cloud and private cloud and hybrid and so on, a lot of the traditional skills that you needed in an enterprise IT department have gone away. So we need fewer and fewer skills to deal with physical tin, physical servers on site. More and more servers are moving off site, either to a co-location facility or into just being replaced by cloud, and software is being replaced by kind of continual development, cloud native type technologies. What that tends to mean is that the skills that we used to employ for, in terms of people who knew how to run cables and do tin and do all that stuff, an enterprise needs far fewer of those skills.
They're no longer relevant en masse.
They're not so relevant en masse, but they're still necessary, because there's still some equipment that needs to be installed on site. You just can't get away from it. If you've got a reasonably large site, you have to have some kind of on-site authentication technology, because otherwise it's just too slow. And you need to have, there'll be some sort of networking routers and things to connect you to the internet and perhaps connect your offices together. But that's not an all-consuming day job in the way that it used to be. And what that means is that now a company doesn't need all those skills, but when something goes wrong, they need all those skills, which is where an MSP really comes into its own, because we have all of those skills, and you can have them on site for as often as you need them. But we're out there keeping our skills up to date, making sure that we know what's going on, making sure we understand how those systems go together, so that when something really does go wrong, we're in a good place to be able to respond to those problems. And likewise, I think as automation starts to become more prevalent in the cloud, so we're looking at, I think it's Aws Guard Duty recently launched, which will use the dreaded AI to try and understand your logs, your system logs. The job of the humans in the chain is to understand and respond to the errors and things that it finds, which again requires a knowledge and an understanding of a system that is only needed when there's a problem, and of course to design the infrastructure properly in the first place to make sure that you minimise the risk of those kind of problems.
Yep.
So whilst a lot of those old school jobs are disappearing, and right now you need to work for a data center pretty much, or work for a public, work for Amazon if you want to touch the tin. The skills that are needed now are more kind of nuanced skills of being able to understand what the messages are and how they apply, and what you're going to do about it, what the response is going to be, planning and training for those eventualities when you have a problem. So I think that's those skills are changing. They're still needed.
And does that reflect a change in mindset as well? I mean, you and I have had numerous conversations around two topics. The first is flexibility in delivering the kind of operating model that a customer wants: hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, private cloud, colo, whatever it is. Yeah. Give choice to the customer. And then the second one was this idea of the economy of expertise. You're only going to find that within a managed services provider or a specialist that has enough people trained up in order to maintain certifications, because this is what they do day in, day out.
That's
it's
right.
Not I used to lay cabling.
I think that's right. I think that's the challenge that enterprises, small enterprises, large, medium-sized businesses have, is that they just don't have enough work to justify having someone on full time. But the problem is that you can only if you're hiring a person, you can really only hire one person. So even if you can afford to have one person who knows all that stuff, they are just one person. So when they're, when they want to have a holiday, because we have to let people have holidays, or they're keeping their training up to date, so on a training course, or if they're ill, then there's no one there who understands what's going on, which for certain types of businesses is a considerable risk, and one that they should address by. Typically, you address it by hiring several different people, but with the lack of need for those people, you can't afford to hire them. So turning to someone like an MSP who is keeping those skills up to date, who is understanding what the market is doing, who have people who are experiencing problems. If you've got a good problem solver, you need to give them problems to solve. Otherwise, they get bored and will leave. So I think as long as MSP type operations have the ability to attract and retain some of the best people, so that we have so that we can respond quickly to people's challenges.
That's such an important point to make. I mean, in a lot of our videos and our discussions together, we're talking about the perspective of the client, the perspective of the business and the enterprise running IT. What about keeping the talent happy? Is there an advantage to becoming having a very narrow domain expertise within the enterprise that may become relevant in 2 years? Go.
I think that's a really good question. I think that the most important thing is that good problem solvers like solving problems, so you have to give them problems. But the difficulty with that, of course, is that we want to engineer systems that have as few problems as possible.
Of course.
Those people who like solving problems also like designing interesting things. So you have to give them a complete, you have to keep their interest by keep giving them interesting things to do, difficult problems to solve.
New problems, new projects,
new projects, new clients. All of those things are vital to keep the kind of people that we want to work with, who are, they're curious, and they're widely read, and they understand all sorts of systems. They have a mental model of how these systems work that is quite technical, and they can adapt that technical model and those skill sets to just about any system. So quite often we come across, when we're talking to clients, we'll come across a system that we've never seen before, but that doesn't really matter because we basically know how it all works. So we can, there's a small bit we don't understand, so we work to understand that bit, and then we understand that for the next client. So those kind of stretches of people doing new stuff is what keeps people interested.
That's true. That's a really important point to make for the kind of people that we would attract.
Yeah.
Given our engineering culture, our belief that variety can be the spice of life as well.
Absolutely.
Now, moving on to the final segment of this, I wanted to talk to you about the changing role of the systems administrator and the changing role of the developer. Over the last 4, maybe 5 years, we've been heavily exposed to changes in the way that software is written, or the way that software is commissioned. Mm-hmm. We've seen significant levels of abstraction from the infrastructure up to the PaaS layer. Functions as a service is just about to hit the mainstream, along with new data applications, things like this. Where do you see the convergence between development and systems administration? I mean, we've talked about DevOps, but we've got a slightly different take on things, don't we?
We do. The interesting thing is that developers and systems administrators come at these problems from almost two completely opposing views. Developers love change. That's why they do what they do. They're making new things. Systems administrators typically don't like change, hence things like Dilbert's MORDAC, the Preventative Information Services. Change has to be considered, and in today's world where things are changing much more, the administrator is more concerned with the kind of external facing security of things, of the resilience of them, of planning DR, of planning how all these things are going to work, whereas the developer tends to be more incentivized around the functionality that they build. Now that's not true everywhere. Some places do build in metrics into their measurement systems for their staff that do look at things like, have you built in security, have you planned for DR and so on. But most of the people that we encounter, developers are very much about, here's the new thing, we're driving to the new product, we're making the new thing. And in a slightly traditional world, I suppose, when it gets handed over to the operations team, the operations team are then responsible for making it resilient and making it work. Where I think the convergence is coming together is that the developers have to adapt more to the security mindset. They have to make sure that they are building from scratch systems that are going to work well in a cloud-native environment, that are capable of working across multiple sites, that are not traditional one machine runs it all kind of designs. And the administrators have to be a little bit more embracing of change in terms of faster release cycles and so on, which is also a business issue. But once that's in place, the administrator's role then becomes one that is more of a monitoring and oversight type of role. So it's about establishing the standards that the developers should work to, and about making sure that those standards are followed. And then ultimately, effectively, what becomes the network operations center or the security operations center in terms of monitoring the system as it goes through. So developers need to be available, they need to be accountable for the reliability of their system in production. And a very good friend of ours is working in an operation where she is responsible for making sure that her developers really buy into the fact that they are responsible for how well it performs in production. And what we see is the administrators then become much more associated with the sort of overall security and governance and performance optimization and cost optimization within the public cloud. So their role becomes slightly different in terms of the things that they need to do.
I mean, this seems to be a much more mature, nuanced analysis. If we were to take a step back and look at what DevOps is and what it is not, mm-hmm. we tend to talk. DevOps does not mean move fast and break things, with the operations people saying, just don't break it, just don't break it, just don't break it.
Yeah.
We see DevOps as a methodology that has to do with the developer taking on more responsibility for what they're actually doing with the code in a production or test environment.
Yeah.
And when we talk about continuous integration, continuous delivery, we look at that as a methodology. Test-driven development is something that has an operational impact.
Yeah.
But in the same way that, operations has not so much spend into development, it's development that is spent into operations, but whatever operations lost in terms of their role, you're saying that there's a third thing here, that operations has now moved into security.
Yeah.
So it's the conversion of operations and security, but development has taken on a wider operational role.
Yes, correct.
And that seems to be the source of the misunderstanding. We see security as something that has to be there and can't get around. We see move fast and break things is a great way of innovating and prototyping, but not at the expense of losing security or stability over your production environment.
No.
And we see that the changing roles of operations folks has to become more of a systems architect or a solutions architect in terms of understanding the base components.
Yeah.
We had a chat with Paul, our technical director, around the building blocks and how to move them around. But I think it's very clear now that the security mindset bleeds into operations, and that is the day-to-day reality.
Yeah.
Development and the methodology for producing cloud-native software has changed and taken up more operations. Final question is, where does that leave the MSP?
The MSP is providing a set of experience. You said expertise, economies of expertise earlier on, and I think that's the key thing. Some of this stuff, as it becomes a little bit more abstract, I think some of this stuff becomes harder to understand. You can't, you need to do more work to become skilled in those areas.
Yeah.
The days when you could bluff your way into a web developer job just because you could write a bit of HTML is long gone, or at least it should be. You have to know about these things and you have to have studied these things. And whilst the business can take a certain amount of operational risk by saying, well, we'll hire Joe Bloggs, he can just get on with it because he knows about these things, and we'll just sweat him and we'll make him work all weekend and we'll make him work his holidays. He'll never not be on duty. I think it's safer for businesses when they have some risk of being online. It's safer for those businesses to use an MSP where they get a range of skills available to them that are highly skilled and highly experienced, and use those for making sure that that they've got all the skills in-house that they need, or all the skills available to them in-house when they need them, provided by an MSP that can do a number of different things. To conclude on that point, we see that the choice to hire an MSP is one of fear or one of pragmatism. The fear of loss. Yep.
I'm hiring digital craftsmen to prevent something from going wrong.
Yep.
You've architected it right. You've got your predictive monitoring method. Whereas the pragmatic would say that things will always go wrong because we manage them in-house, or that there's a span of responsibility, but we don't have the expertise or the coverage.
Yeah.
We don't have the skills coverage to respond to something when it goes wrong. Yeah. So even if we wanted to go cloud native, we can't.
Yeah, there's certainly something in that, in that the skills needed to take advantage of a lot of these cloud technologies are not ones that you can just sort of pick up and run with. You do need to spend some time working with them to make sure that they're secured properly. There's a number. Regularly, you get things like MongoDB instances that haven't been properly secured and just made available on the web. If you're not thinking those things, if that's not part of your mindset, then you won't cover those things, and you'll put your business at risk. Whereas using an MSP that is security focused from the start means that we're naturally paranoid about making sure that data doesn't leak, that we don't have those problems. And touch wood, so far, that's not been a problem for us.
Well, Simon, thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
Excellent episode.
See you next time, folks.